Okay, back to part 2 of creating the horizontal scroll view. So I'm going to make this class, I'm going to correct it to horizontal scroll, and I'm going to subclass it of a UI view. And a UI view, if you guys don't know, isn't this complicated thing that Apple made that you can't control. You can actually control a lot of UI view, is that you can control the size of it and you can control what goes in it. When you initially load a screen, it's just a UI view, and then within that UI view you can add as many views as you want into it. So you can add a table, which is just a table view is a subclass of a UI view. So we're going to make a subclass of a UI view. And to do this, we need to implement our own init functions. And to do that, we're going to override the usual init, which usually needs a frame. And what the frame is, it's just the starting XY coordinates, the top left coordinate, and the height and width of the rectangle the view creates. Views are made in a rectangle. So we're going to call init, and so we're going to call its super constructor initializer. And for now, we're going to leave it like that. And we're also going to implement the other required initializer, which we inherit when we subclass UI view, and that's called init coder a decoder. And you don't have to worry too much about what this is. It's really complicated. Trust me. The reason I say you don't have to worry about it because I don't know anything about it really. But if you don't subclass both of these, override both of these, you will get an error. Okay. So now we're going to make a function called set up scroll. And so this is going to be the function that's not going to return anything, that's just going to set everything up. But first, we're going to set up our elements. And the first thing we need to do is we need to set up the whole crux of this class, which is going to be our delegate. So we're going to set up a delegate. And what is this delegate going to do? It's going to be part of the horizontal scroll delegate class. And we're going to make it an optional because you can optionally set it. And that's delegate. If you've ever done a table view manually, a table view controller manually, is what you need to set so that once you set this delegate, the class that you set that delegate in will need to define the two methods we have above, okay? And also what you need is a scroller, and that's going to be a UI scroll view. I'm going to make an exclamation mark because it has to be set, okay? So now we're going to do that. So first thing first is setting the scroller equal to a UI scroll view. And we're going to use this because this is what's going to allow us to swipe from left to right like I showed you guys in the earlier video. So then what we're going to do is we're going to initialize the scroller, and then we're going to add it to our view. So we're going to add the scroll view to our view, and that's done so we can scroll throughout it, because otherwise if we didn't do it, it would just be a standard view which you can't scroll around. That's why we need to use a scroll view. Now we also need this scroll view to encapsulate our entire class, and so to do this we're going to use constraints. And to do this programmatically is kind of complicated, but bear with me here. So I need a constraint, just like if you're using the UI builder, you would need to make constraints to make everything fit properly or look good. You need to do it in code. And this is how you do it in code. It's actually not that hard once you acknowledge things. And so the way you do it is with all these hairy parameters, and I'll explain in a second once I type out all the code. So we're using something called visual format language. And what that is it allows you to basically visually say how you want your layout to look in code. And I'm going to copy this. I'm going to make this constraint 2, and then I'm going to add this to be a V, and now I'm going to add the constraints. So one thing I need to do is I need to create a varchar dictionary and make it scroller. Okay, so now I did a few things here. So let me explain the constraints here. So the constraint, the visual format language, which is done by doing nslayoutConstraint.constraints with visual format language, is done by this kind of language. So both the bars mean the super view. So it means that this this scroller, this scroll view, which I've defined here, is going to stretch from the all the way to the left of the super view, so the view it's contained in, all the way to the right. Pretty good. And then so options, I gave it NS layout format option 0, so there's no options. This could be maybe if you wanted it to specifically do something very specific that we won't worry about. It's a little bit advanced. Metrics is if you wanted to set certain sizes. So if you wanted it to be only 200 pixels, you would put it in metrics, and it would be a dictionary. And views is dict. And so that's how this dictionary is used to stringify or say, okay, this string is actually talking about this view. And so you do it by setting this string to a UI view right there. And then so the H means horizontal and the V means vertical. So this bar just means now the top, and the other bar means the bottom. And then you put whatever your string, whatever your view is, which could be a table view, a label, a text view, inside brackets. And that's basically it, and everything else means the same thing. You also need to add your constraints. And so you can do that pretty easily. You just do this, and then you got to do it again. So add it twice, and then add it to the subview. And then we should be good to go right there, okay? So now we have basically what should be one of our last methods we implement, and that will be our superview method. Not our superview method, sorry, that will be our reload method. So this will actually load the views inside our scroll view. So the first thing we're going to do is probably our most important check is we're going to check if the delegate is not nil. So we're going to do this by if let delegate equals delegate, and then only then we'll go inside this if statement. And so now we've got a few things to do. We have to add all the views returned from our number of scroll view elements that the user defines, and put all those views that they define in element at scroll view index into our view, into our scroll view. And so we are going to do that. And it's going to be pretty cool. So now if the delegate is defined, we are going to then do a for loop. So we're going to do for index in 0 dot dot 0 dot dot 0 all the way to delegate dot number of scroll view elements. So we're using the delegate, which should have the number of scroll view elements defined, that element defined, to know how many elements there are. And now we're going to add them to the view. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do let view equals delegate dot scroll elements at scroll view index. So I'm going to get a view back at that index. So I'm going to ask for the 0th index that I want at the first, and go all the way through for how many times the user has defined. You see, this is where our protocol is coming in. We're using our protocol elements to make this code very customizable. So whatever the user has defined is how many views I'm going to have, and each view can be customized, as I'll show you when I implement it in my view controller, pretty easily. Okay, so then, well, now everything gets kind of good. So now we can do a few things. We can do scroll. We're going to do scroller.add subview, and we're going to add that view to the subview. Pretty easy. But we do need to do a few things along the way. So we're going to have var x offset. So we're going to have var x offset, and that's going to be a CG float. CG float is just how you do a float, which is a decimal number in Swift. So now that we have defined our x offset, what we need to do is, the x offset is very important because it's going to allow us to add our views horizontally, because we're going to be increasing the x and x every time we want to add a view, so that it goes from left to right. Now we can do this. We want to do this in a nice way. So the way we're going to do that here is we're also going to define a variable up top, and we'll make it a constant, and we'll make it an integer, and we're going to make it equal to 10. And I don't think it will work like that. So we're going to make that an integer. And so what that is going to do is that when I set is now down here, I'm going to set the frame of my view, which is basically the x and y coordinates, to be something more specific. I'm going to set it to be I'm going to set it to be what I want to be so I can make sure it's a certain size so the user can't put anything really crazy inside. So I'm going to do CG rect make again. And so then I'm going to define the frame. And so I'm going to define the frame with this padding and then Y with this padding. And it won't work as an integer, so we're going to need to cast it to a CG float. And we're going to do that here. Boom. And then we'll make the width, we'll make it CG float, I'll make it 100.0. And we'll make the height a CG float. I'll make that 100.0. And with the X, we actually have to do something more. We have to do some more math, so we're going to make it a CG float. But this time we're going to have the X plus 10 every time. And actually, we're just going to have X here because I'll show you guys every time we go through the loop, we're going to do, oh, it's because X is already a CG float, so we're not going to worry about that right now. So we've got the X, so we're going to do X equals, every time we go through the loop, we need to increase the X, so it keeps on, so the views keep getting added more to the right. So we're going to do that by adding X to be equal to X plus the padding, plus the view dot frame dot size dot width. So we want to add the offset of the X to be the padding plus what X already is plus the width of the view, which is what, to do that you have to do dot frame dot size dot width, and then we are going to add it. And what is my error here? Use of unresolved identifier X, and that is because it is X offset. And now it's giving me another error. Could not find an overload for plus. That's because I probably need this to be a CG float. So I need everything to be of the same data type to be able to add it correctly. And so now, no more errors. Okay, so now after that, life is pretty good. But we need to do one more thing. I need to set my scroller. I need to set the content size. So the content size is going to be what? The content size right there is going to be what allows us to scroll left and right, depending on what I do. So we do that with CG size, and then we declare a width and a height. And so the width is going to be the X offset, and the height is going to be self.frame.width. Sorry, dot height. Ooh, okay, so that's going to allow us to do everything right there. Okay, now we need to do one more thing. We need to override a func. So func to super view. So we're going to override a function that makes it move to the super view. So every time, so when this view is made, reload is run and the views are created. And this function is called did move to super view. Move to super view, and then we're just going to call reload, which is the function we made down below. Okay, that is our scroll view. And we're going to end this video here and then finish up with the view controller in the next episode.